Lesson 12, I will reason using benchmarks to compare two fractions on the number line. We started talking about how you can put fractions on a number line in Lesson 11, and today we're going to talk about benchmarks. And a benchmark is where you use something that you understand to compare to things that you don't understand. And we're going to be using some benchmarks on the number line. I'll point them out to you as we get there. So go ahead and write your name at the top, and let's go ahead and get started. So it says plot the following points on the number line without measuring. So basically what we're going to do here is we're going to use this number line to figure out where these fractions are on the number line. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to take a look at thirds. It says 1/3. So I'm going to partition this number line into three parts, just like we did our last number line in the last problem that we just did. So you're going to notice that I'm not going to put this right in the middle. I'm going to put it closer to the 1/2. And I'm going to come over here and I'm going to put this one closer to the 1/2. So this would be 1/3 and this would be 2/3. Okay? So it says plot the following points on the number line. So here's 1/3. I just did that one, so I'm going to put a little check mark by it. Now we have to do sixes. So if these are thirds, 1, 2, 3, then I can make these into sixes by dividing the thirds into half. So I'm going to divide this third into half right here. This is already dividing that third into half, and this is going to divide this third in half. So now I have 1 6, 2 6s, 3 6s, 4 6s, 5 6s. Okay? 1 6, 2 6, because that's equivalent to 1/3. 3 6, because that's equivalent to 1/2. 4 6, because that's equivalent to 2/3, and 5 6. Now I'm going to do 12ths. So to do 12ths, I just divide the 6's in half. So I'm just going to come over and I'm going to divide every one of these in half. Now every one of these marks equals a 12th. So I've got 1/12, 2/12, 3/12, 4/12, 5/12, 6/12, which is the same as 1/2, 7/12. So notice I did label 2/3. That's the only one I labeled on here that's not up here. So I labeled 5 6 and I labeled 7/12. Now we're going to use the number line to compare the fractions. So I've got 7/12 and I'm comparing it to 1/2. Well, since 7/12 is closer to 1 than 1/2, that means that 7/12 is greater than 1/2. What about 7/12 compared to 5 6? Which one's closer to 1? Well, 5 6 is, so 7/12 is actually less than 5 6. All right, now we're going to do another one. Plot the following points on the number line without measuring. So this time we're doing 12ths, 4ths, and 8ths. So I'm going to look ahead here, and I'm going to start with the smallest denominator first. I'm going to start with 4ths. So it's already divided into two parts, so these are halves. So if I divide each half in half, this will make 4ths. So I have 1/4, 2/4, which is the same as 1/2, 3/4, and 4/4, which would be 1/2. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to label 1/4. Now I'm going to go to 8ths because I know if I take 4ths and I divide them in half, that makes 8ths. So I'm going to divide each of these in half. And now I have 8ths. 1/8, 2/8, 3/8, 4/8, 5/8, 6/8, 7/8, 8/8. So now I have to label 3/8. So this would be 1/8, 2/8, 3/8. All right, so now it says 12ths. Well, 12s would not be 8s divided in half because that would be 16ths. 12ths would be 4ths divided into thirds. So I've got to come back and look at my 4ths. I'm actually going to make my 4ths just a little bit longer so that I can find them a little bit easier. So a half would be like a 4th, and then this would be a 4th too. Okay, so these are the 4ths. So if you'll look, I've got 1/4, 2/4, 3/4, 4/4. So if I take a 4th and I divide it into 3 parts, I will have a 12th. So I'm going to do this. Okay, so this would be 1/12, 2/12, 3/12, I'm going to have 4/12, 5/12. 6/12 is the same as a half. 7/12, 8/12, 9/12, 10/12, 11/12, 12/12. Okay, so these are 12ths. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Kind of hard to see. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go back and I'm going to put a little dot under the 12s, and I want you to do that with me. So this is 1/12, 2/12, 3/12, 4/12, 5/12, 6/12, 7/12, 8/12, 9/12, 10/12, 11/12, and 12/12. So you'll notice we're skipping the eighths. Okay? All right, now we're going to find 11/12. So instead of going back through those and counting all those again, let's just count backwards. So if this is 12/12, if we go back 1, we'll have 11/12. And I know that 11/12 is almost 1 because 12/12 would make the whole. Okay? All right, select two fractions from part A and use the giving number line to compare them by writing greater than, less than, or equal to. All right, so if I have we have these three fractions, 11/12, 1/4, and 3/8. So I'm going to select two of them. How about 1/4 and 11/12? So if 1/4 is down here closer to 0 and 11/12 is closer to 1, then I know 1/4 is less than 11/12. And then it says, explain how you plotted the points in part A. Well, that could get really lengthy, couldn't it, if we went through every single thing that we just did. So let's just start by saying, let's start with our strategy here. So first I plotted the fourths by dividing, or let's say by decomposing the halves into fourths. Then I decomposed the fourths into eighths, and then again into 12ths. Doesn't like this eighth. Maybe I didn't spell it right. Okay. All right, so I started with the fourths because it was the smallest denominator, and I plotted the fourths by dividing the halves into half. And then the eighths were pretty easy because all I had to do was divide the fourths into half. And then the 12ths got a little bit trickier because I had to divide the fourths into 3 parts, which was a little bit confusing because all those other parts were already there. Okay, let's keep going. All right, now we're going to compare the fractions given below by writing greater than or less than on the lines. Give a brief explanation for each answer referring to the benchmark fractions 0, 1/2, and 1. Now here's where boys and girls like to get a little bit lazy. They know that they have a 50-50 chance. They can either put less than or greater than, and they have a 50-50 chance of getting it right, and they want to skip the explanation. So I'm going to be really picky about the explanation because the explanation tells me whether or not you guessed or whether or not you really understand. All right, so we're going to start right here with A. And we have 1/2, and we're comparing it to 3/4. So I'm just going to sketch a little number line right here, and this can kind of take the place of your explanation. If you can sketch this on a number line, then I know that you understand. So if this is my number line, and I have 0, and I have 1, well, here would be half. Is 3/4 going to be closer to 1, or is it going to be closer to 0? Well, this would be 2/4, so 3/4 would be right here. So that tells me that 1/2 is less than 3/4. All right, so let's take a look at B. Again, we're just going to use our number line as our explanation. So we're going to start with 0, that's one benchmark, and 1, that's another benchmark, and then we're going to compare this to 1/2. So think about 7/8. How many eighths are in a whole? Well, that would be 8/8. So 7/8 is going to be closer to 1. So 1/2 is less than 7/8. All right, so now we have 2/3 and we have 2/5. So let's take our number line here. We have 0 and we have 1. So let's think about this. If I divide this into thirds, okay, I'm going to have a line here and I'm going to have a line here. So I've got 1, 2, 3 parts. So 2/3, this is 1/3, this is 2/3. Now if I divide this into fifths, okay, so I'm actually going to kind of come back and erase this one. And I'm going to try to ignore the third there for a minute. I'm going to try to divide this into 5 parts, okay? So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4. So ignore this one. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 parts. So let's do 2/5. 1/5, 2/5. So 2/3 is greater than 2/5 because 2/3 is closer to 1 and 2/5 is closer to 0. All right, let's take a look at D. All right, so I've got 0 and I've got 1. So the first thing I'm going to do is divide this into fifths. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 parts. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 parts, 4 lines. So fifths, this would be 1, 2, 3/5. Now to make tenths, I have to divide each of these into half. It says 9/10. 1/10, 2/10, 3/10, 4/10, 5/10, 6/10, 7/10, 8/10, 9/10. So which one's greater? Well, because 9/10 is closer to 1, 9/10 is greater than 3/5. And if I look at these two numbers, 9/10 is almost a whole. And 3/5 is more than a half, but it's not almost a whole. 4/5 would even be more than 3/5. All right, so let's keep going. All right, so now I have 2/3 and 7/8. So this time, I'm just going to partition it into thirds like this. So I've got 1/3 and 2/3. So this is my 2/3. Now let's think about 7/8 for a minute. How much does it take to make a whole in eighths? It takes 8/8. So that means that 7/8 is only 1/8 away from being a whole. So I know it's going to be really close to 1. So I don't have to divide this whole line into eighths to understand that 7/8 is close to 1 whole. So 2/3 has to be less than 7/8. All right, let's take a look at 1/3 and 2/4. So let's divide this into thirds. So I've got 0, 1, and then I'm going to partition this into thirds. So this is 1/3. So what do you know about 2 and 4? Well, 2 is half of 4. So that means that 2/4 is the same as 1/2. 1/2 and 2/4 are the same. They are equivalent. So 1/3, because 1/3 comes before 2/4 on the number line, it is less than 2/4. All right, let's take a look at 2/3 and 5/10. All right, so here is 0. Here is 1. So let's go ahead and get our thirds. So this would be 2/3. Well, what do you know about 5/10? Well, 5 is half of 10. So that means that 5/10 is the same as 1/2. Because 5/10 comes before 2/3 on the number line, 2/3 is greater than 5/10. All right, let's take a look at H. I love these numbers that are like this, where the two numbers are almost close together because it's so easy to tell that they're almost 1. All right, so let's do fifths. So I'm going to divide this into 5 parts. First of all, I'm going to put my 0 and my 1, and I'm going to divide this into 5 parts. 1, 2, 3, 4 lines make 5 parts. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 1/5, 2/5. Now, I don't have to divide this into 12 parts because look at this. 11/12 is almost 1 whole. It's only 1/12 away from being a whole. So I know it's going to be way down here by 1. So 11/12 is greater than 2/5. All right, now, I'm not going to divide this number line into 100 parts to make this. That would just be silly. I've just got to think about this for a minute. First of all, if this is 0 and this is 1, this is 49 hundredths. What would be half? What's half of 100? Well, 50. So if this is 50 hundredths, then 49 hundredths is going to be just closer to 0. And what about 51 hundredths? It's going to be just a little bit bigger than 50 hundredths. So 49 hundredths is less than 51 hundredths. All right, so let's take a look at J. So we've got 7 sixteenths and we've got 51 hundredths. Well, we learned from over here that 51 hundredths is 1/100th greater than half. So if this is half and this is 0 and this is 1, then this would be 51 hundredths. And what do we know about 7 sixteenths? What would be half of 16? Well, if 8 is half of 16, then 8 sixteenths is half. So 7 sixteenths is going to be less than half. So 7 sixteenths is less than 51 hundredths. Now, I know that what we did today was pretty tricky, but what you need to do is really rely on your visual models. You need to take a second to draw out the number line and really think about what you know about fractions. It's very tempting to just guess because you have a 50-50 chance. But I'm telling you, if I don't see a number line here that's labeled correctly, even if this is right, I'm going to count it wrong because you can guess and get this right half the time. It's more important that you understand how to do this. And sometimes you may get it wrong even though you've thought it out, and that's okay. But just by thinking it out and drawing your models, you're going to learn and you're only going to get better and better at it.